Well, for so long, so many experts used inoffensive words and phrases to describe the dark clouds circling our economy. Remember all that talk of soft landings and corrections. But now there's no choice but to call it what it's become, a recession. It's more than a word to the hundreds who lost their jobs today, those struggling to buy a home, those businesses scrambling to stay afloat. Tonight we're going to start a conversation about the two big questions that come with recession. How do we get here and where do we go next? In a few moments, I'll be talking with Eddie Hobbs and Danny McCoy of IBEC. But first, let's remember just how hard it was to face up to that word, recession.
Sitting on the sidelines or on the fence, cribbing and moaning is a lost opportunity. In fact, I don't know how people who engage in that don't commit suicide.
Now seeing a correction in the housing market, that adjustment is properly handled through an increase in our public capital programme as envisaged in our National Development Plan.
We see, pretty good economic conditions continuing, and as a result, yes, a moderation in house prices, a slowdown, but no, we don't foresee a crash.
It's a rebalancing the economy. There's certainly a deceleration going on. You see that in the property market.
Yes, we have our difficulties, particularly in construction, but we're not hearing about almost 4% growth, for example, in financial services this year.
We need to keep a perspective on this, and I think some of the talking down of the economy to the point almost where people were talking in Armageddon type scenarios. It really needs to stop.
The economy is now in recession, according to the latest figures from the Central Statistics Office.
And that's how we got here. Well, joining us for our conversation this evening is Eddie Hobbs, financial advisor and broadcaster, and director of policy at IBEC, Danny McCoy. And Danny, a lot of smart people didn't see this coming to this point. Why was that?
Didn't see the extent of this. I think the speed of what's happened here domestically, we knew for some time we were going to have to get off the carousel of the property market. And I must admit, I was one of those people who felt that at the start of this year we might be lucky, that we would have a correction against quite a benign international backdrop. And
to be fair to you, you said before in your studio, you said, there was a strong world economy. It's not there now. Is that the single reason we're at this point? No, the collapse of the financial system?
Not the single reason, but it has to be seen as an incredibly important one with the veracity of the movements that we've seen in the financial markets have been really like a once in a 100-year flood that's really just hit the global economy. And the analogy of that flood idea, I think, is that you're really seeing a lot of flow of funds moved from the Western world to the East, and the similar capacity wasn't there for it to get recycled back. Risk got mispriced, all over the globe, including here in Ireland. And I think that, in that context, people were very low to admit that they weren't sure where the equilibrium was. It's very clear that the Irish economy has been on a downward trajectory for at least 2 years. But the speed at which it's happened over the summer months, I think, has certainly in my lifetime, I've never seen it.
Eddie Hobbs, they did say today, Brian Lenihan said today, that it was primarily external factors, the collapse of the international financial system, the credit crunch.
Yeah, but that's just propaganda. I mean, it's almost like we've had a corpse on the kitchen table now for quite a while. And we've just decided today, look, it's actually dead. We have a recession. It's been happening for quite a while. The great difficulty I have with the spin that's been going on, and it's coming from the same sources, cheerleaders talking up the property market, including government sources, is that now they're trying to blame external factors. The facts are that the wheels started to come off the wagon several years ago when in budget 2002 was pro-cycle, and we ended up in a situation where about 1 in 4 of our taxes was coming from the property sector. It's now down to about 15%, but it's too damn high. It should be about 1 in 20. And that big bet on the construction sector was always going to be unsustainable. It was always going to be a cyclical downturn. And it was basically used to fund expansion in the public sector, and now those chickens have come home to roost.
But nobody could have seen the fact that, the 3 of the top 6 financial institutions at the stage just go wallop in a space of a couple of days.
Yeah, but I mean, true, but that is an event that happened in the United States because of hugely falling house prices and a crazy credit bubble over there. It's made our situation worse. But the bottom line is that we were already in difficulty before this. So this nonsense from the government that, hey, it's all external factors, needs to be seen for what it is.
And Danny, people are saying the economy's fundamentals were sound, but we were, 20% of our GDP last year came from construction, which is actually twice as much as in America. We know what happened there. So the fundamentals weren't sound, were they, during this period?
Well, a lot of the construction build was for a population that has increased dramatically. I mean, what's happened here in Ireland wasn't replicated in the US. I mean, we've looked at the population going from 3.6 million to 4.2 million. So you're going to have to build for that. And a lot of the money that came in, and Eddie mentions back 2002, when revenue comes in, it's fungible. It's not earmarked for any particular reason. But what you see is that we've got a huge build in this economy, not just houses, in terms of the motorways, in terms of infrastructure, right across the land that have been used and financed from those revenues. Up to 2 years ago, we were paying for a whole public capital programme from cash. And so the sustainability of the Irish economy is crucial to us all, but it's a much stronger position going into this recession than any time before. Our public debt is one of the lowest in the world.
Eddie Hobbs, is there a danger that maybe the public who, were buying up houses with huge enthusiasm, may be actually overreacting? Consumer sentiment is down in the CSO figure today by a dramatic extent. Are there signs of panic rather than caution coming out?
Well, there was panic throughout last week because of, the fear of a very substantial problem in the banking market.
My question is it justified given the economic underpinnings we just talked about?
Well, it was. If the rescue package hadn't been stitched together in the US, there would have been very severe difficulties. Also, I mean, I think that if you look at the history of bubbles, property bubble bursts, it's quite clear we haven't reached the point of capitulation yet in prices in the market. And that's, it seems to me inevitably going to happen because we've an oversupply. Banks aren't lending. Certain occupations are blacklisted, including people from the construction sector, and ironically, a lot of people from the banking sector. The banks sold their house, their principal private residences, their head offices at the peak of the bubble, and got the hell out of it. And we're now in a situation where our main banks, the tier 1 capital they've got, is about, between a 10th and 1/14th the size of the total loan book they've got. So if bad debts rise to more, to say 2% of the loan book, they're going to need fresh capital.
Can I just take it at the level at which you operate every day, which is as a financial advisor? I mean, what are you hearing from people on the ground who are facing, debt situations? I'm not talking about the bank managers or the banks themselves. What about real people on the ground?
Well, a lot of people bought into the bubble at the top of it, and interest-only mortgages and so on, and prices have come down a lot more than the reported prices, because the reported prices are reporting actual sales. What they're not reporting is the actual horse trading that's going on in the background, and there's this standoff going on, and it can't go on forever. I got an email earlier today, and I have permission to use this. I just got this at a few hours ago, and it says it's addressed to me in my website. And it says this would be typical now, I think, of what we're going to see, and that's why we're going to need state support around people, including MABs being expanded, and an agency set up, I think, to make sure that people's mortgages are supported under principal private residence. It says, I just want to die. I have 5 residential investment properties, and it's costing me over €2,000 extra over the rent to fund them. I have a car and hire purchase for €900 a month. I'd like to sell the car, but I can't. My main home is €1,500 a month, all paid and not in arrears, but by Christmas I'll be in trouble. I've 3 kids and I love them. My husband doesn't want to know. I can't sleep. I pretend to be happy, and yet I yearn to be with my mother in heaven to break the cycle. I'm just lost.
Daddy, I'd hate to be a Minister for Finance trying to address a situation like that, but someone has to. So what are the government's options coming up to a budget? We've had the US government, it looks like, are very close to a bailout deal for their financial institutions, but the Irish government have very few options, do they, as they go into an October budget?
There are very few options, but they're quite solid in terms of going back to that point in terms of the net debt position. I mean, what you're seeing happening in the States, and that huge sums of money is going to increase the public debt to the US taxpayer in true time. Ireland has that capacity as well, but within the Eurozone we need to show fiscal control with the Stability and Growth Pact, 3% deficits allowed. We're going to go beyond that this year and into next. But the government can use funds to try to steady the economy.
So something,
but
will they have
do
a
need
similar
to take
situation
control
to the
of
US?
Public expenditure.
Will they have to come up with a bailout for the financial sector, help for hard-pressed people?
Not
like
at
Eddie
this point,
described?
because Eddie made points about Tier 1 capital, but in terms of the exposure in the American system to the subprime lending, was a much more severe event there. But what I'm saying is that the government has capacity, but I think what it really has to do is, for stability purposes now, take control of public expenditure, current expenditure in particular, but use the capacity it has to continue the productive capital spend. And the other aspect is it really shouldn't rush to putting up any taxes. That wouldn't be the right way to go.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave it there. Eddie Hobbs and Danny McGuire, thanks for joining us. Obviously, the start of a conversation, not the end of it by any means. Well, it's happened